An ependymoma is a tumor of the brain or spinal cord. Our guest survived an ependymoma, but it wasn't easy. This is a rare type of cancer, and because it is rare, it brings with it additional challenges. We're going to hear about that and much more from our guest, Kathy Kuhl of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Here she is. And Kathy, welcome to the Cancer Interviews podcast.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. Thanks for having me on today.
And we want to start out the way we always start out, and that's to learn a little bit more about you, your life exclusive of cancer. So if you would, Kathy, tell us a bit about where you're from, what you do for work, and when time allows for fun, what you do for fun.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been here 25 years now. And after a stint in advertising, I started my own business, sort of by happenstance, a candle business that is actually focused towards pet memorials. So that's been going on now for 14 years, doing really well with that. And I'm married, no children, just on dog number 3 at the moment. And for fun, dog stuff, photography, boating, anything outdoors, basically.
All right. Now, I want to talk about your cancer journey. And for all of us who are cancer survivors, many of us, our lives from a health perspective, were going along just fine. And then something happened that didn't seem normal, and that changed the whole trajectory. So if you would, tell us when you first experienced something abnormal and what it was.
Years ago, I started having a little bit of some dizziness and kind of vertigo, and they couldn't find anything. They weren't looking in the right place, is what we found out. And back in 2014, after experiencing increasingly more painful back pain in my thoracic area, which is right between the shoulder blades, it actually started turning into more of a burning sensation, like someone had lit a match inside my back. And I would go to bed at night and on an ice pack because it was just so incredibly painful and uncomfortable. And I thought, because of my candle business, I must have pulled a muscle or agitated something. And that's when I went to a neurologist and talked with her about the symptoms. And I could tell by the look on her face, she already knew what was going on. So we had an MRI immediately. And upon finishing that MRI, I was told I needed to get down to the hospital right away because a neurosurgeon was waiting for me to talk to me about that they found a cancer tumor inside my spinal cord. And when I heard that, everything went blank and dark. And my husband and I just thought, that you can't get a tumor inside your spinal cord. This has to be a mistake. But when we saw the images at the surgeon's office, it was clearly that was something that shouldn't be there. And I had been experiencing, again, like more dizziness, blurry vision, neck stiffness. And it was because the tumor had grown to the point it was impeding the flow of the spinal fluid. So the surgeon said, this needs to come out sooner rather than later, because it was just becoming a more dangerous situation. So I ended up having surgery about 10 days later. And upon surgery, when you go into surgery for something like this, and a lot of other tumor cancer types, they want to monitor you to make sure that they're not getting into any of the nerves that are going to impede your motor skills, sensory nerves, anything of that nature. So I was being monitored the whole time. When I woke up from surgery, I was told everything went great. At first I couldn't feel or lift anything. They kept asking, can you lift your foot? Can you feel this? Can you feel it? I couldn't feel anything, but I was just so excited that I had the surgery over. But what ended up happening was I ended up with it's a hard word for me to say, paraparesis. It's like a sort of a paralysis that happens. And so I ended up staying a month in the hospital and going into rehab and learning how to walk. And after a month at Courage Kenny here in Minneapolis, I was then did outpatient physical therapy for about another 2 years, because until you lose the ability to walk, and as with other things, all of a sudden it's like you really appreciate the intricacies that go into everything that goes into walking. So it took a long time for me to really get to a point where I had a more normal gait, and I had the strength to really start walking without a walker or a cane. So, and that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm still doing physical therapy right now because I do have some continuing weakness in my left leg that we're working on. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good. I did lose sensory from the diaphragm down on both sides. So if my dog lays her head in my lap, I can't feel it. Sometimes my pants might feel like I'm wearing sandpaper. So the sensory nerves are they're out of whack. And if they're not back within a year and a half to 2 years after surgery, they're not going to be coming back to where they were originally. You might see incremental improvement, but it's not going to be life as it was. So,
by the way, we're confident you'll be able to learn some tips and tools to help you through your personal cancer journey. But first, we'd like to invite you to please give us a like, leave a comment, leave a review below, and share this story with your friends. Kindly click on the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon. That's when you'll be notified when we have a new interview. And if you or a loved one are facing a cancer diagnosis, please click on the link in the description and show notes below to check out our free guide, The Top 10 Things I Wish I Knew When I First Got Cancer. At what point, Kathy, did you feel like things were starting to turn for the better? Because we've heard about the treatment you've gone through and what you've gone through, especially with your gait, your ability to walk. At what point did you feel like things were starting to get better?
I would say was about 2 to 3 years into my recovery. I was a runner prior to the surgery. In fact, the day I had my MRI, I went for a long run with our dog. It was just normal. Coming out of all of this, that was off the table. Even going for a walk with the dog was something that took a long time to be able to do. So it was when I was starting to have those opportunities that I was able to do that, I really started to feel like, okay, I'm coming out of this. But it did take about 2-3 years before I was able to do just a walk. I went for some walks, but it wasn't until much later that the improvement started. I felt more confident, I guess, in my abilities after that period of time.
Now, you were and are in the Twin Cities area, which I'm guessing is well stocked in terms of hospitals and doctors and options in terms of treatment for any sort of medical problem. But imagine being diagnosed with an ependymoma and being in, say, rural Minnesota. How tough would that have been, the combination of your location and available healthcare professionals?
It probably would have been much more difficult. I was lucky in the fact that my neurologist had a very good personal relationship with the neurosurgeon that I got into. And he's someone who is very much in demand in this area. And as far as brain tumor, he's actually pediatric brain tumor is his primary focus, but he also does spinal cord tumors, which he did for me, obviously. But I do know other patients who are in outlying areas of Minnesota that have found their way to the same Gibbons Brain Tumor Center where I'm being treated. It just takes a little bit longer for them to sort of sort out where to go. I know a gentleman down in southwest Minnesota, and when he was diagnosed, he actually came up to the Twin Cities because he was having issues. So he was diagnosed here in the Twin Cities and was able to be directed to the Gibbons Brain Tumor Center immediately. So, and then there's another woman I know from Bemidji, and she actually went to MD Anderson in Texas. And MD Anderson is another very well-known, renowned facility. So, as you know, so I think for both of them, it just took a bit of time and research, but it is difficult because it is so rare and you don't know, am I going to the right surgeon? Am I doing the right thing? Because some do a wait and see, some have it immediately. I had no choice but to have it immediately. So there's a lot to unpack once you're diagnosed, especially if you're living somewhere where you don't have an MD Anderson in your back door. Fortunately, we do have Mayo as well, so that's another option. It's just, I think it just takes people a little bit longer.
Kathy, now there is the piece that involves getting treated. Then there's the piece involving the support, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. Once much of the treatment is behind you and you're in a post-treatment mode and you need support. And this is, I am guessing, where being diagnosed with a rare cancer or rare disease can be extremely difficult, because whereas for those of us diagnosed with prostate cancer, in my case, or breast cancer, there's all manner of support groups. But where does one go when one is diagnosed with a rare cancer or disease to find support?
It was difficult in the beginning to find that support. In fact, when I got to Courage Kenny for rehab, they handed me the book from the Christopher Reeve Foundation on paralysis, which shocked me. I just thought, did I miss a meeting on something? Because I thought I was going to be here to learn to walk, not this. And they said, well, we don't have anything about an ependymoma tumor or spinal cord tumors. We just don't get patients like you very often. And I thought, God, that's going to have to change. And I joined this online forum that I found. And the minute I filled out the form and hit send, a woman came back to me and said, well, hello, Minneapolis. I'm in Minneapolis and had an ependymoma tumor as well. So she and I formed an immediate bond. She actually, in talking with her, she was learning how to speak again because her tumor was higher up. I was learning to walk again. And we were both just in this desperate need to connect with someone who can understand what we're going through, because it was just so hard to do. The doctors that I was at the time, back in 2014, 15, there wasn't a lot of this going on. And so they only knew about this one forum that I joined. And since then, there's a lot of Facebook groups, which is helpful. My husband and I then also, because we just felt like, Facebook is great, but one-on-one personal connection is also very important. And so we started a nonprofit called Walk, Talk, Connect. And it is geared towards attracting patients and their families to come, go for like a 3-mile walk. You don't even have to do the full 3 mile if you can't. And just connect with other patients, other families that are going through this, have been through this. This past, about 2 weeks ago, we had a walk and we had 2 new patients that came because they were needing that connection, that personal connection with one another. And at one point there was 4 of us patients sitting around comparing stories and symptoms and rehab and, everything that we've been going through. And there was another gentleman that showed up. He was in his 80s and he had just been diagnosed with an astrocytoma recently. And he actually lost his son about 10 years ago to an astrocytoma brain tumor. And so he is now in his 80s with the same diagnosis. And he really needed to feel a connection with other people. And so he came out to the walk, and God bless him, he did the full 3 miles. It took him a long time, but he did it, and that's the sort of support that we need as patients and as families, because, the caregivers are, this is all new. Where do they turn? So it's really geared towards patients and caregivers, and also medical staff, so that they can come and hear stories from patients and be able to understand what patients need in the recovery process. And one thing that happened in 2021, Dawn Standera, she had written a book about her own personal experience, and back in 2021, she came to me and said, "Hey, would you help put together a book of patient stories with spinal cord tumors?" And that book got published, and we had a book launch last year in 2022. The book is available on both walktalkconnect.org and Amazon, and proceeds from Amazon go to the CERN Foundation, which is the collaborative ependymoma research network, who is hugely helpful for people going through an ependymoma. And then walktalkconnect.org sales go to Gibbons Brain Tumor Center for further research for patient therapies. So we've really, in the last, since 2015-16, we've really started to connect with people on a more one-on-one personal level in a number of ways, which has really been helpful. I talk to people. I'm in constant communication with a woman in Maine, for instance, and there's another woman in New York. And, so we all, we do Zoom calls, we text, we email. So we've really been able to grow our network of people that we can connect with.
Okay, and your organization is Walk Talk Connect, and the web address, which you've given us, we'll give it one more time, and this is all one big word, walktalkconnect.org. Now, you had mentioned dealing with people in New York State and the state of Maine. So this tells us that Walk Talk Connect's reach goes well beyond the Twin Cities. So if somebody wants to go to your website, are there, and you've mentioned some of them, Kathy, but what are some of the other ways that the website can be of help? What sort of information can it provide?
We do post patient stories on there. So if there's about 6 or 7 patient stories on the website, dealing with brain tumor or spinal cord tumors and different tumors, ependymoma, astrocytoma, meningioma. There's hundreds of rare tumors. And we try to address facts and information about different tumors, and also post patient stories that have different types of tumors. We have the book, like I mentioned, online, that people can order the book as well. They're always free to reach out to me through Walk Talk Connect. My email is on there. So they'll find information and patient stories that hopefully they can connect with.
And by virtue of all this, it sounds like that helps to fill the void, especially for people who are in, as you said, outlying areas who are not able to immediately access the healthcare professional they want. You might be able to put them in touch with somebody, or you can provide the support, because we talked about how the support for people with rare cancers, rare diseases is not as plentiful as it might be. So these are a number of great things that Walk Talk Connect can do. Now, Kathy, you had mentioned the book. Could you mention the name of the book one more time?
The name of the book is Reconnected: Stories from Survivors of Spinal Cord Tumor. So Reconnected, and it's by Dawn Standera is the author. And I worked with her on the title and the book cover and finding patients that would tell her story. But yes, Reconnected: Stories from Survivors of Spinal Cord Tumors.
All right, Kathy, we are going to wrap up now, but we always wrap up the same way that we always start out from the same place. And that is, let's pretend that somewhere as you were going throughout your day, you encountered somebody one-on-one who had just been diagnosed with ependymoma or another type of tumor in the brain or spinal cord and they didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go, you might have a multifaceted message for that person. But if there's one or two things that really stand out above everything else that you would want to get across to that individual, what would it be?
Oh, I would say, I learned I was stronger than I ever thought I was going through this process. I would also encourage them. Actually, I got a message online today from someone who said they didn't know about Walk Talk Connect and they were grateful to finally hear about it. And so I'll be connecting with them when we hang up here. But I think, it's one of those things, like, encourage them to, come out, talk. I'll have coffee with them. I think that's the biggest thing that we need, is be able to have someone to talk to, someone who listens and fully understands what we're going through. And someone that can kind of hold your hand and walk through some of the process. This person, they're 2 years out right now, but they're still feeling, where do I turn? So I will be contacting them when I hang up with you, and we'll chat.
Excellent. And one more time, that web address for Kathy's group, Walk Talk Connect, is just one big word, walktalkconnect.org. Kathy, that's going to wrap things up. Really appreciate your sharing your story, because it's a story that needs to be told, and there are people out there who need to hear it, and they need to hear about what you've done and what Walk Talk Connect can do. So, Kathy Kuhl, Minneapolis, Minnesota, thanks very much for being with us on Cancer Interviews.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Appreciate the opportunity.
And we're going to say, as we always do when we wrap up, that if you are on a cancer journey, you are not alone. There are people out there like Kathy. There are organizations like Walk Talk Connect that can be there to help to ease your cancer journey. So until next time, we'll see you on down the road.